Part 16. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 151. Someone must go back and restrain Wu Yu before he can continue to crack the 10,000 sword formation. Zhang Xie thought for a while and then said after careful consideration. He generally had a plan in mind. The Tongtian sword sect can delay for a few days, but the Xuanhuan Dao sect can't wait any longer. Tens of thousands of people died. Zhang Xie didn't want to be born in his sect. The 9 Immortals smiled sweetly and said, "Brother Zhang, this is simple. I will let Lei Mingniao go over. We will continue to wait for the 10,000 sword formation to be broken, and then directly capture this place." In fact, Zhang Xie also thought about asking Lei Mingniao to help solve the problem. But, that is a demon after all. Zhang Xie has been dealing with demons all year round, and he actually knows that the most untrustworthy thing is the demon. Among the monsters, the fox monster is the most untrustworthy. Now the Bibo Mountains are at a critical moment. If the trouble is not eliminated, they continue to attack, and the Thunderbird arrives at the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. The Thunderbird is a 1,000-year-old demon. Once he takes action against those hundreds of thousands of disciples, he will threaten this side. Then with this cooperation, the 9 Immortals can make more demands, and even occupy the Blue Mountains. Demons also need spiritual energy. Zhang Xie is very afraid of the 9 Immortals, and the most fearful thing among them is that he is worried that the 9 Immortals' real purpose is the Bibo Mountains. For those people in Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain, once Lei Mingniao passes by, as long as the 9 Immortals do something bad, that will be the reason for them to fall into the hands of the demon. At that time, he will definitely be controlled by the demon. That's why, before the alliance, Zhang Xie made inquiries in many ways to find out all the powerful men under the 9 Immortals, so as to avoid anyone among the demons from sneaking into the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain, and sent Zhang Ji to guard it. Unexpectedly, Wu Yu would cause such a scene. Another point is that Zhang Xie naturally knows that the number one goal of the 9 Immortals is Wu Yu. If Lei Mingniao is allowed to go, he will kill Wu Yu for the sake of Zhang Junlin, Mo Xiu Dao, and this time in Xuanhuan. It is even more impossible for the disciples of Xianshan to seek revenge. The conflict between him and the 9 Immortals because of Wu Yu or even his hidden purpose will eventually explode. Therefore, in the face of the 9 Immortals' attentiveness, he shook his head and said, "This is a matter for my Xuanhuan Dao sect, and I still need to solve it myself." Zhu Xian had expected that he would say this, so he said, "Brother Zhang knows how important Wu Yu is to me. If Brother Zhang insists on killing Wu Yu, I will withdraw from this battle immediately." ... This is gentle menace. Zhang Xie knew she would say this. He smiled coldly and said, "Don't worry, I still need to exchange him for my younger brother and eldest disciple." The 9 Immortals then smiled sweetly and said, "That's no problem. Wu Yu will be yours this time. I will take him away after the Tongtian sword sect is defeated." This time Wu Yu made such a big fuss in Xuanhuan Fairy Mountain, so she couldn't be too domineering and grab people directly. After all, their cooperative relationship was actually thinner than paper. Zhang Xie secretly told the elders here to be wary of demons. The Xuanhuan Dao sect's team left here is still very strong. There are several at the 10th level of Qi condensation. They are not afraid of demons coming. Moreover, this time Zhang Xie and the alliance between the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea is more stable. For the time being, he trusts the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea more because their territory is in the East China Sea and they will not come here to compete for territory. "Brother Tianyi, I leave this place to you, just wait for me for 2 days. Please rest assured, Master Zhang, I will not let this fox demon mess around. Our relationship must be stable." Tian Yujun nodded seriously. "Feng Shui is a brave man. I'm not here, so be careful of his sneak attack." Finally, Zhang Xie told everyone that he had decided to return to Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain quickly, capture Wu Yu, and exchange hostages by the way. Brother Zhang, don't worry. Unless he gives up this 10,000 sword formation, how many people will come out, Juxian said. Tian Yijun also said, don't worry, Sect Master Zhang. We fought against Feng Xiya in the East China Sea, and he can't do anything to us. Even if you are not here, he can't take any advantage by giving up the 10,000 sword formation and directly fighting us to the death. After all, Lan Huayun and Feng Shui can be dealt with by the 9 Immortals and the 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea first, while the demons and the elders above the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm of the Xuanhuan Dao sect are twice as powerful as each other, and they will absolutely crush them. The 10,000 sword formation can still hold on for one day. They won't give up until they have to. Even if they give up, it's just that we destroy the Tongtian sword sect first, haha. To be honest, Zhang Xie knew that leaving this time would definitely be risky, but he could only take the risk, otherwise hundreds of thousands of lives in Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain would be no joke. Here, he can only rely on his friendship with the 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea, which has become very deep during this period. Walk. Zhang Xie left in a flash and waited nearby for an hour. Seeing that nothing happened after he left, he drove a fiery red gourd in the distance and flew towards the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. Wu Yu. This junior is driving Zhang Xie crazy. In the 10,000 sword stone gate, everyone had been paying attention to what was going on here. When they saw them suddenly stop destroying the 10,000 swords formation, Feng Shui knew that Wu Yu had succeeded. They couldn't help cheering, but Feng Xiya suppressed them. Zhang Xie is gone after a while, Lan Huayun said excitedly. Elder Shentu said, he must have returned to Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. How about we give up the 10,000 sword formation and kill directly? Feng Shui shook his head attentively and said, Zhang Xie is suspicious by nature and will definitely wait around for a while. Let's wait for 2 hours first. Time passes. Elder Shentu asked, Headmaster, do you mean that you are ready to give up the 10,000 sword formation and fight to the death? Feng Shui turned around and looked at the thousands of young and passionate faces behind him. He shook his head and said, the 10,000 sword formation is hard won. Once we give up, it will be a complete war, and there will definitely be countless casualties. Moreover, even if Zhang Xie if we leave, we have no chance of winning. Even if we win, we will definitely suffer heavy casualties. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. What about that? Feng Shui's eyes were fixed on a person in the distance, that was Lord in Entropy. In a corner where no one could see, he kidnapped a female disciple of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, quietly hid and stepped aside. Now the 10,000 swords formation has been destroyed by almost 10% and is on the verge of collapse. However, a skinny camel is bigger than a horse. The 1,000 swords formation is still effective. As long as Lord Dark Entropy dies, it can continue to hold on for more than a month. The last thing he wanted to see was for these young disciples to die on this land. You want to go alone, right? Lan Huayun turned her face sideways, feeling helpless. But this is Feng Xia's temper. Feng Shui suddenly smiled and said, speaking of which, I have to thank God for giving me a disciple like Wu Yu and giving me the opportunity to try my newly learned Taoist skills. Lan Huayun's expression changed, she was a little surprised, and said, you have learned that technique. Feng Shui nodded and said, there has been no breakthrough in 10 years. Recently, I have been in crisis. I am confused and tormented. But I have achieved something. God is helping me. However, if it were not for Wu Yu, I would not have this opportunity. I'm afraid only they themselves can understand this conversation. Except for the two of them, no one else understood. This is a great opportunity. Yuxio Lan Huayun turned around and said to Yuxio that night, wait a while, your master will leave here, and you will inherit the position of your master. What I have taught you these days, but remember them all. In fact, ever since they were stationed at the 10,000 Swords formation, in order to prevent accidents, they had taught the elders and Wan Tianyugzhu how to preside over the 10,000 Swords formation. Although Wan Tianyugzhu was far inferior to others, let alone Feng Shui, but it would be no problem to hold on for about a quarter of an hour. After all, no one was attacking the 10,000 sword formation at this time, and they just needed to maintain its operation. Yes, Wan Tianyugzhu was overjoyed. He knew that his most respected master was going to fight. Although, he was also confused. 2 hours are up. Feng Xia is basically sure that Zhang Xia has left. Once Zhang Xia leaves, it is basically impossible for them to enter the 10,000 sword formation to destroy it, and there is one less powerful enemy. This is the best opportunity to take action. It was created by Wu Yu. I was planning to fight to the death against Zhang Xia and Zhu Xian, but I didn't expect that it would come in handy at this time. At this moment, Feng Xia jumped down, and Wan Tianyugzhu jumped up, using his magic power to control the formation, supporting the operation of the Wanjian formation. The Wanjian formation vibrated several times, and finally held on, Wan Tianyugzhu a bit strenuous, but it lives up to expectations. Whoosh! Without saying a word, Feng Shuiya stepped on the golden giant sword and charged out. The 10,000 sword formation made way for him. In an instant, Feng Shuiya rushed out and landed on top of the enemy's head. In fact, when the 10,000 sword formation was shaking, the other party noticed it. They were all alert for a moment, but when they saw Feng Shuiya coming out alone, they were a little confused. For a moment, the 9 Immortals, their subordinates Lei Mingniao and other great demons, as well as the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea and Lord and Entropy, stood in front of Feng Xia and blocked his way. Among them, Lord Tianyi probably understood Feng Xia's intention. 7 people directly surrounded Lord Dark Entropy and said to the 9 Immortals, 9 Immortals, his intention is Lord Dark Entropy. We protect Lord Dark Entropy. You stop him. Zhu Xian smiled sweetly and said, as a man, leave it to me to deal with it, it will be the best. However, while the opponent was facing a formidable enemy, Feng Shuiya had a calm look. The long wind passed by, and he was flying like a sword fairy coming to the dust. His eyes were calm, and golden sword light suddenly appeared in the feint. Juxian walked forward slowly and said, are you Wu Yu's master from the Zhu'er family? Feng Shuiya glanced at her silently, not being tempted by her. At this time, the long sword in his hand was gently raised, and for a moment, the sword energy seemed to be flying invisibly. It seems that he wants to fight, and he will fight the heroes alone. Zhu Xian's eyes narrowed. She didn't believe that Feng Shuiya was so bold. But at this moment, Feng Shuiya raised his sword and lightly swiped it in the direction of Lord and Entropy. For a moment, there seemed to be no movement. Ah, ha ha. Mr. An Entropy couldn't help but laugh. He felt that Feng Shuiya was playing monkey tricks. Click. Suddenly, he was laughing and his head fell to the ground. Feng Shuiya was relieved, his face was pale, and he seemed to have exhausted all his strength in one move, and quickly returned to the 10,000 swords formation, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Dark Entropy Lord. When everyone saw it, Lord Dark Entropy had been separated from human and animal, and was dead. Juxian knew that Feng Shuiya had exhausted all her strength and chased into the Wanjian formation, almost catching Feng Xia. However, seeing Wanjian coming, she had no choice but to withdraw from the Wanjian formation. He tried his best and I almost killed him. What kind of Taoist technique is this? It's so powerful, Zhu Xian was shocked. Only Lan Huayun smiled, she knew that this was the Taoism from that place. There is the origin of swordsmanship. /U003ch//U003e. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Feng Qing Yang. Chapter 152. Xuanhuan Fairy Mountain. Wu Yu stayed here for 2 full days, and within 2 days, he completely disbanded the entire Xuanhuan Dao sect. Nowadays, there are many Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples hiding within 1,000 miles of Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. Everyone was hiding in panic, and they were extremely embarrassed. In addition, it had been raining heavily in the past few days, which made it even more desolate. The entire Xuanhuan Dao sect seemed to be destroyed. There were people everywhere who were extremely frightened and wailing in despair, but even so, Wu Yu's killing was still not over. When the range was enlarged, it became even more difficult for Zhang Ji to catch up with Wu Yu. As long as he arrived, Wu Yu would rush into the sky and fly up. The clouds will appear in another place after a while, causing a burst of howling ghosts and wolves. Yu Jian flew in the vast clouds and mist, looking at the mess below, with trees swaying here and there, mountains collapsing, and rivers splashing. He deliberately created a scene of mourning everywhere, but in fact not many people actually died. I hope this can help Master. Wu Yu knew that his cultivation time was short and the role he could play was limited. Fortunately, he could fly with a sword. If Zhang Xie knows what's going on here and comes back to catch me, it will probably be around the same time. If I am caught, Zhang Xie may kill me in a fit of rage. Even if he doesn't kill me, he will torture me and even threaten the master. Therefore, I must not fall into his hands. He had a plan in mind, so during this period, he mostly hid in the jungle. He had done everything he needed to do in the past 2 days, and it was just a matter of whether Zhang Xie would come back. Once Zhang Xie comes back, Wu Yu can basically be sure that the Tongtian sword sect is still safe. Perhaps because he had cultivated the indestructible body of the Monkey King, he had beast-like intuition and a very keen sense of danger. Not long after he stopped attacking, he came down from the clouds and hid in the woods in the mountains. In less than an hour, Zhang Xie, riding a red gourd, appeared in the sky above Xuanhuan Daozong. Seeing him, Wu Yu was first of all delighted. Success. This means that the Tongtian sword sect is now safe. Danger. In fact, he had already thought about the opportunity to escape. The position he was in now was relatively marginal and conducive to leaving. Furthermore, where he is now, there is a huge river, hundreds of feet wide and more than 20 feet deep. It is the largest river in a radius of thousands of miles. The river surrounds the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain and rushes downstream. When Wu Yu saw Zhang Xie arriving, without saying a word, he dived into the water droplet, held his breath and concentrated, drifted with the current, and was washed away downstream. Wu Yu had just arrived here 2 days ago, and he had already thought of this escape route. This was inspired by Wonking. Wonking was like this. With the help of the river, he could hide himself from a mere little demon and escape from Feng Xia. Sneaking away. The water was cool, but to Wu Yu, who had an indestructible body, it was nothing. He even completely closed his breath and remained motionless, like a piece of wood. However, the hundreds of bags of rice on his body were indeed a bit of a hindrance. After drifting downward for about an hour, Wu Yu found a place to bury the bags of rice, and then continued to sink to the bottom and float away. He did not dare to leave the bottom of the river for the time being. Zhang Xie. Being chased by this golden elixir powerhouse, Wu Yu was still a little nervous. Fortunately, Zhang Xie didn't seem to notice him. In fact, Zhang Xie also underestimated Wu Yu's IQ. He originally thought that when he came back, he would see Wu Yu continue to cause trouble in the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. However, when he came back, he only saw his disciples wailing. There was no one within 1,000 miles. Wu Yu's shadow. The Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain is so big, and hundreds of thousands of people are mixed here. Wu Yu deliberately hides it, and it will not be easy to find him. Where are the people? Zhang Xie found Zhang Ji and asked with a livid face and trembling teeth. Gang, he was still killing people just now, just an hour before you came back, he seemed to have suddenly disappeared and was never found again. How did he know I was coming? Zhang Xie was speechless. I guess it was his estimate. Zhang Ji rarely saw his brother get so angry. Plus, he was actually fooled by a junior, and he couldn't hold his head up. Go to hell, Zhang Xie roared and slapped Zhang Ji on the face. Zhang Ji, who was at the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm, rolled around on the ground several times, covering his bright red face, his eyes full of evil spirit, but don't dare to target Zhang Xie. Obviously he is hiding. If I don't catch him, I can't go back to the Bibo Mountains. If I don't go back for a day, there will be more variables. Find them all for me, Zhang Xie said angrily. In fact, he is also responsible, because his return was too ostentatious, with the big fiery red gourd flying across the sky, no one could see it. Zhang Xie realized that if he was stuck here and couldn't find Wu Yu, he would definitely go crazy. He drove the big flaming gourd and searched everywhere. Wherever he went, there were only places where people could be hiding. The other people, Jian Sect Master, returned, and for a moment they were calm and joined the search. About one person after an hour, everyone discovered something. Wu Yu is so powerful that he claims to kill 100,000 people a day, but very few people actually die. Yes, most of them are just injuries, and he is very measured and does not fight to death. Zhang Xie had been touring for a while and probably figured it out. Although he didn't find Wu Yu, when he reunited with Zhang Ding, his expression softened a little and said, "This Wu Yu is indeed not as virtuous as Feng Shui. If he really dared to kill 100,000 people in one day, I would be really scared. But in fact, if he really wants to kill people indiscriminately, he would be afraid of losing his merit. Turns out he's a coward," Zhang Ji sneered. "You still have the nerve to say that you haven't noticed such an obvious thing yet," Zhang Xie was angry again. If he could see it, there would be no need to ask Zhang Xie to come back. Zhang Ji could only sneer and say, "I was confused before and didn't look carefully." Moreover, the disciples were too scattered. There are hundreds of thousands of people. I still have to see everything. I have to have a big brother. Zhang Xie said, "Gather all the Qi condensation realm disciples and outstanding outer disciples and bring them into the Yong'an underground palace. You guard the door. Even if Wu Yu comes again, there will be nothing you can do. As for the handyman disciples, let them be around. Just wander around, Wu Yu won't kill them at all. This person has a weak character and won't be able to make a big impact." Zhang Ji smiled and said, "Brother is right. If it were him, let alone 100,000, even 1 million, he would still have to lie down. Shut up. Hurry up and do the work." After Zhang Xie said that, he walked away, not knowing whether to return to the Bibo Mountains or to secretly pursue Wu Yu. Now that the scene is finally out of chaos, Zhang Ji also has the opportunity to ride on a crane and fly to the sky, summon the elite disciples, and enter the Yong'an underground palace in an orderly manner. There is only one door to enter the underground palace. With him guarding it, Wu Yu can't do anything. Soon after, Zhang Xie returned directly to the Bibo Mountains. "Zhang Xie can't find me. Judging from the fact that I haven't killed too many people, I will probably leave." Wu Yu knew it very well. However, among those hundreds of thousands of people, there were too many innocent people, and they did not have the strength to invade the Tongtian sword sect, so Wu Yu could not kill them. There are still some Qi condensation realm disciples. I wonder how he will deal with them. Wu Yu walked along the river, this time going up, and occasionally came to the river to see what was going on. He saw that the people from the Xuanhuan Dao sect seemed to be returning in an orderly manner, and the chaotic scene had calmed down. Zhang Ji seemed to have gathered a team, all of which were relatively elite disciples, and seemed to be moving to a certain place. Went. We can't let them go. Wu Yu knew that these thousands of people could threaten Zhang Xie. However, he didn't know if Zhang Xie was lurking around. Therefore, there is absolutely no way to stop it at this time. He could only watch helplessly as Zhang Ji brought thousands of disciples into an underground palace, and he guarded the door. The rest were basically servant disciples. This is troublesome. Zhang Xie will continue to destroy the 10,000 sword formation when he goes back. I don't know what's going on with Master. This Zhang Xie probably only stayed for a day and then left. It is really difficult to defeat Zhang Ji head-on and threaten Zhang Xie with thousands of disciples. Is there any other way? Hiding in the dark, looking at the underground palace, Wu Yu's eyes were cold and stern, and he pinched off a branch next to him. He knew that there wasn't much time left for him. About half a day later, Wu Yu stood up. He knew that in about half a day, Zhang Xie would reach the Bibo Mountains. Even if he is at the 9th level of Qi condensation realm, he still has to fight. As long as he doesn't die, there is hope. Wu Yu took a deep breath. Facing this invincible enemy, he was preparing to fight to the death. At this moment, he saw several Tianyunpeng in the distance in the sky behind him. Why did Tianyunpeng fly here? Could it be that Master sent me a message? With Tianyunpeng's speed, even if he doesn't bring his disciples, he should be able to get here by flying at full speed in 2.5 days. This is still the largest and strongest Tianyunpeng. Wu Yu directly raised his sword into the sky and caught up with Tianyunpeng in the distance. Wu Yu, Zhang Ji raised his head and saw him walking away, gritting his teeth for a moment. Sure enough, Wu Yu hadn't left yet. However, Zhang Ji smiled. Judging from the fact that Wu Yu had left now, it was clear that he could no longer carry out his plan a second time. The previous chaos was over. Wu Yu caught up with Tianyunpeng, and sure enough, there was a note from Feng Xiya on it, writing, "Lord and Entropy has been killed, and the 10,000 sword formation is still there, and he can come back." These few dozen words made Wu Yu feel like tears filled his eyes. This is real success. Once Lord and Entropy dies, at least the destruction of the 10,000 sword formation is no longer an imminent matter. Even if Zhang Xie returns now, the Tongtian sword sect is no longer in danger. I just don't know how Lord Dark Entropy died. Now that Mr. An Entropy is dead, there is really no need for Wu Yu to be here. After all, he is alone and has no one to take care of him. Of course, Feng Shui hoped that he could take the opportunity to fly away, but he knew Wu Yu, so this was simply impossible. Without saying a word, Wu Yu cheered, dug out his bag of rice, and flew over the Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. "Zhang Ji, next time we meet, I will kill you." As they flew by, Wu Yu stood on his sword, holding his trophy in a condescending manner. "Trash, just let your horse come over." Zhang Ji didn't know about the death of Lord and Entropy yet, so he thought he was running away. He felt so happy that he couldn't help humming a song. /U003CE /U003E /U003CE /U003F. Follow the official QQ account 17K, ID, Love 17K, read early, and keep abreast of the latest information. /U003C/E /U003E /U003C/E /U003E. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 153. Wu Yu was worried about encountering an ambush on the road, so he took a detour to the Tongtian sword section. 2 days later, he detoured back to the Tongtian sword sect from the direction of Xuanhuan Valley. When he got closer, he saw that the 10,000 sword formation was unscathed. To be able to sustain the 10,000 sword formation until now and still protect everyone shows the ability of Feng Shui and others. When Wu Yu returned, everyone in the Tongtian sword sect cheered as they looked at the young figure flying past in the sky. Wu Yu! Wu Yu! Wu Yu returned to Wanji and Shimin. As soon as he landed on the ground, Xuanhuan and others were surrounding him. Thousands of disciples were surrounding him. Their eyes were blazing. Some were in tears, some were in admiration, and some were excited. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow diamond suit. Everyone, this is. That night Tian Yuxiu hugged Wu Yu tightly and said loudly, "Junior brother, you have done a great job this time. If you hadn't diverted Zhang Xia away, Master would not have had the chance to kill Lord and Entropy. You are our great master hero, you saved everyone. Yes, Wu Yu, you are a hero." For a moment, he became the focus. Everyone was cheering for him and admiring him. They looked like family members. Su Yanli, Qing Mang, they seemed to look at him with admiration. Wu Yu probably understood that it was Feng Shui who took the opportunity to kill Lord and Entropy. He arrived at the foot of Feng Xia cliff amid cheers and hugs from everyone. Zhang Xia had just been back for 2 days. During this period, he launched several attacks. However, even though most of the veins of the 10,000 sword formation were destroyed, it still held on. And they started repairing it as soon as they had time, so it is estimated that it can still hold up. If the 10,000 sword formation is not broken for a day, the Tongtian sword sect will be unscathed, and the opponent may retreat in the face of difficulties. Master. Once a teacher, always a father. Feng Shui lost some weight, but when he saw Wu Yu, he couldn't help but smile and said, "Wu Yu, our fate came quickly and fiercely. Today, I am proud to have a disciple like you. If we survive this disaster in the end, you will be everyone's benefactor." Wu Yu didn't think so much. He just wanted to repay his kindness. He just didn't want to see his new home littered with corpses, and he didn't want his new friends and siblings to die in front of him one by one. It's not over yet. We will hold on until they retreat. And you, relax a little and make yourself as powerful as possible. You are the future of the Tongtian sword section. Feng Shui particularly liked his disciple, especially because Wu Yu returned from Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain safely. Good. With Feng Xia and the others supporting him, Wu Yu has a completely peaceful environment where he can continue to strengthen himself and start his crazy path of cultivation. But during this time, he still has things to do. He suddenly turned around and put the nearly 200 bags of rice that he had snatched from him on the ground. "Brothers, I once borrowed qi condensing pills from you, and today I, Wu Yu, finally got rich. As the saying goes, borrowing money requires something to borrow, 1 qi condensing pill, and today I will return 2 of them. There is also a gift from Xuanhuan Daozong's magical implements, Mi's bag, and other things are given to everyone. He has already packed up things that are useful to him, such as Elder Chu's magical weapon Death-Killing Gourd, Elder Mu Shue's magical weapon Zhongshan Map, and more than 300 qi condensing pills. This is still to pay off the debt. The remaining qi condensation pills after that were enough for him to reach the 10th level of qi condensation. Among the others, there are a total of 5 immortal spirits from 2 elders with a spiritual pattern. They can all be used to make elixirs in the future, and Wu Yu will keep them for now. Give away the rest." These were all belongings to the Xuanhuan Dao sect, so everyone took them very happily. Seeing the disciples being so happy, even Lan Huayun couldn't help but smile. She found that when the disaster was approaching, she liked Wu more and more. "This is Yu's disciple. Shuiyu, do you like him?" Lan Huayun lowered her head and asked Lan Shuiyu, who was outside the crowd. Lan Shuiyu was startled and said, "Auntie, I don't dare. I'm a little afraid of him." "Why is this?" Lan Huayun was stunned. She thought she and Wu Yu were not acquainted and had a falling out. Lan Shuiyu stared at Wu Yu and said, "His growth far exceeds that of mine. It is very scary. I feel like I am an ant in front of him. Maybe one day I will be like this. Therefore, I dare not approach him. So, when he was surrounded by the crowd, she retreated outside, alone. Okay. Lan Huayun couldn't deny it. Judging from Wu Yu's performance today, he was a man of great fortune. As long as he didn't die, he was destined to soar into the sky. Maybe Wu Yu will have the opportunity to enter the real battlefield of Dongsheng Divine Continent in the future and compare with those peerless talents. Amid the cheers of a small victory, time passed, and the night was silent. Wu Yu was not dazzled by the cheers, and immediately under the moonlight, he returned to Yanli Peak, to Sun Wudao's former grave, and continued to forge. Inner Vajra Buddha, now he has more than 300 Qi condensation pills, he only needs to continue to forge the Vajra indestructible body. Su Yanli was right next to him. She was also practicing meditation. She was dressed in white and looked particularly dusty under the night. Under the moonlight, her delicate face looked like a fairy, pure and flawless. She opened her eyes, but her eyes were a little dim. Looking at the 10,000 swords formation in the sky, she sighed softly. Although Lord and Entropy is dead, the 10,000 swords formation has shaken its foundation. How long it can hold on is unknown. Wu Yu, do you regret coming here and falling into this crisis? What about you? Wu Yu asked her. Su Yanli looked in the direction of Wanjian Stone Gate and said, Master took me to practice Taoism and gave me everything. I escaped from the mortal world and saw this world. Even if I stop here in this life, I will be satisfied. Tongtian Sword Sect is the place where I was born and raised, and Master is the one who raised me. I am willing to die with this land, rather than leave here and live. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. She is very simple and determined. She is devoted to Feng Xiya. Even Wu Yu doesn't respect Feng Xiya as much as she does. It's your turn to answer. Su Yanli turned her head and looked at him with a gentle smile. Wu Yu took a deep breath and said, I don't know, I am more murderous than you. What I want to do now is to improve myself and kill a few more people and monsters after the 10,000 sword formation is broken. He has not been in Tongtian Sword Sect for a long time. Actually, you don't have to be burdened. You can fly far away. In the future, you can just avenge us. Because in fact, Sun Wudao is the one who helps you the most, not us. You don't need to guard here with us, Su Yanli said. Wu Yu shook his head. Although I can leave alive, I choose to fight to the death. No one and nothing can stop him. That night, Su Yanli stretched out her white palm and held his hand. It was warm in the palm of her hand, and the moonlight was gentle. She was silent all night until dawn. Amidst the rolling spiritual energy, surprises will appear. Perhaps it was the huge pressure that caused the disciples of the Tongtian Sword Sect to become crazy. They gathered together like never before, communicating with each other on swordsmanship, assisting each other in condensing qi, and even borrowing qi condensing pills from each other. Some people need it and some people don't. Wu Yu lent out hundreds of them, and he didn't even frown. They were all snatched. What makes him gratified is that almost every day, he can see someone successfully condensing qi and breaking through to the next level. To practice cultivation now, it is really the right time, right place, and right people. Among them, Wu Yu has always been the most dazzling, because he forged himself with the inner Vajra Buddha, and the shining golden words on his body were constantly cutting, exploding, destroying, and reborn, making other disciples' scalps go numb. This is what they admire most about Wu Yu. Because he could do it, even if it was such torture, he could endure it without stopping and rest. Wu Yu also wanted to stop. After all, sometimes the cultivation of the indestructible body is torture. It requires thousands of times of training and tempering the body. It is forged like a weapon, and all the internal organs are forged to be as hard as steel without losing toughness. But as soon as he opened his eyes and saw the people around him, he knew he couldn't stop. At least, this is the tomb of Sun Wudao. He does not want Xuanhuan Daozong to build a palace for Jiangxia at this location. This is the place with the strongest spiritual energy. They are safe now. As time goes by, they can only see Feng Xia fighting with the opponent in the 10,000 sword formation. Every day, thousands of swords fly and the 10,000 sword formation trembles. It is getting weaker by the day, and it is obvious that it may not last long before it completely collapses. However, no one blames Feng Shui and the others. They have worked hard enough. The 9 strong men in the 10,000 swords formation may not have had a good rest since the battle. When the opponents saw hope, they attacked even more crazily. Without Lord Dark Entropy, they went crazy and even launched a surprise attack, causing the 10,000 sword formation to almost collapse. The more this happens, the more the disciples grit their teeth, shout, or fight with all their might. Their magical weapons are by their side, ready to rush forward and fight to the death. To be honest, in terms of fighting spirit, the disciples of the Tongtian sword sect are much stronger than those of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, but there are still more crippled demons there. Inner Vajra Buddha, Wu Yu continued to forge. As time went by, the inner Vajra Buddha became taller and taller. But even at this speed, if you want to reach 4 feet, at least for now, in the 10,000 sword formation, crash and arrive before the final battle should be impossible. Therefore, Wu Yu was anxious. How he hoped that he could reach another level and at least kill more elder level figures. Unfortunately, nothing is that easy in the world. In fact, the collapse of the 10,000 swords formation was imminent. On this day, one of the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea actually found a loophole, rushed through the 10,000 swords formation, and entered the Bibo Mountains. Suddenly, a terrible crisis came. /U003CE /U003E /U003CE /U003F. Follow the official QQ account 17K, ID, Love 17K, read early, and keep abreast of the latest information /U003C /E /U003E /U003C /E /U003E. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 154. The 10,000 sword array was riddled with holes. Among the thousands of swords flying together, a gap finally appeared by chance. A ghost cultivator who happened to be in that position seized the gap and used it without any traces. The obstacles rushed into the blue waves of the mountains. This is very likely to be a turning point. The 9 people from Feng Xia still need to use the 10,000 sword formation to stop the others. Only the remaining elders at the 8th level of the Qi condensation realm can deal with this person. Once they cannot stop him, let him cause massive destruction in the Bibo Mountains, and even cause Wu Yu's effect on the Xuanhuan Dao sect will be quite troublesome. Once he disrupts the formation of Feng Shui and the other 9 people, it will lead to the complete collapse of the 10,000 sword formation. At that time, Wu Yu was gnashing his teeth, and his body was covered with raging golden words. From the outside, his golden body looked like it was made of gold or diamond. All the disciples around are also honing their swordsmanship and condensing their magic power. Suddenly, there were fighting and noisy sounds coming from the direction of Wanji and Shimin. Wu Yu suddenly opened his eyes and had an ominous premonition in his heart. The surrounding disciples also looked over there. Some had slightly red eyes, and some were nervous and fearful. "You guys stay here, I'll go take a look," Wu Yu said to Su Yanli, Qing Mang, and others next to him, then turned into a golden light, headed in that direction, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Everyone, don't panic. Remember, we will defend to the death." Su Yanli first calmed everyone down, and then turned his attention to Wanji and Shimin. In his right hand, he had already held the magic weapon long sword. "Wu Yu." She was worried. Wu Yu's sword flew across the mountains and stabbed at the stone gate of 10,000 swords. In the blink of an eye, it appeared above the stone gate of 10,000 swords. Looking up, he saw about 10 people surrounding a ghost cultivator in a black cloak, forming a sword formation. Are surrounding and killing this person. The ghost cultivator rushed towards Feng Xiya and the others like crazy. He probably wanted to destroy the 10,000 swords formation from within. As long as he attacked Feng Xiya, the 10,000 swords formation would be broken immediately. 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea. This crisis made Wu Yu furious. At this time, there was already a corpse lying on the ground. It belonged to one of the elders at the 8th level of the Qi condensation realm. As soon as the 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea came in, they actually killed one person. If there were more people here, more people would probably die. One of the 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea is at least the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm, otherwise he would not have been surrounded by 9 strong people of the 8th level of the Qi condensation realm. He still had the strength to resist, but moved the battlefield towards Feng Xiu Cliff. Force him over there. Wherever he went, rocks were broken, trees were downed, and black mist filled the air like a ghost. This ghost cultivator's technique was mysterious and strange, and difficult to grasp. Even the 9 sword cultivators found it difficult to control him and stop his attack. The fog formation had been broken for many days, and Wu Yu could probably identify who this ghost cultivator was. He ranks 6th among the 7 Ghosts of the Red Sea, and is named Lu Haijun. His realm is at the 9th level of Qi condensation realm, only missing one spiritual aperture, which is similar to that of Zhangji. The 2 magical weapons in Mr. Liuhe's hands are very terrifying. One of them is a harpoon, which is completely black and has 3 blood-red dead fish eyes inlaid on it. Every time it attacks someone, it seems to be able to suck it from the body. Blood. There is also a giant net, forged from the sinews of an unknown creature. Dozens of copper bells are hung at the nodes on it. When the bells ring, the sound of ghost cries is heard. The cries surround it and make people's scalp numb. Relying on these 2 magic weapons, the ghost cultivator was able to survive the entanglement of the Tongtian sword sect's 9 palace sword formation, and was able to pose a huge threat to everyone. The entire battlefield, under the pressure of Lord Liuhe, was moving towards Feng Xiu. Move over the cliff. Lu Haijun was causing trouble inside, and Zhang Xie and others outside also seized this opportunity like crazy, gathered together, and killed them. Feng Shui and the others had to concentrate on the 10,000 sword formation and were unable to deal with Lu Haijun. At the foot of the mountain, the second Lord God laughed and said, "Sixth, leave a few girls here, don't kill them all. This female sword cultivator from the Tongtian sword sect is very flavorful, I like it." Boom boom boom. He uses a giant cauldron as his imperial weapon. Whenever 1,000 swords are pierced by it, he will hold it high above his head to block the murderous intent from the sky. The 2 sides are almost in a head-to-head confrontation, and the battle of life and death is about to break out. Mr. Lu Hai laughed loudly and said, "Second brother, don't worry. Today, instead of Mr. and Entropy, let's enjoy these beautiful disciples of the Immortal Mountain's righteous path. I don't want much, 300 are enough." With this change, they have now regarded the Tongtian sword sect as a piece of cake on the chopping board. The treacherous and sinister face of the ghost cultivator is really disgusting. Wu Yu has always heard that the ghost cultivator world is cruel and inhumane. Strength is respected, regardless of merit. The strong slaughter all the common people and treat people like pigs and dogs. It is not surprising. Wu Yu took a closer look and saw Wan Tianyu Shui and Lan Liulai in the 9 palace sword formation. This sword formation is said to be simplified by Feng Shui from ancient formation diagrams, imitating its principles and applying them to form the 4 symbols, 5 elements, 6 paths, 7 stars, 8 trigrams, 9 palaces, and 10 directions sword formation, which is the strongest point of the Tongtian sword sect. That is, more than 4 disciples can attack in formation. Wu Yu's training time is still short, so he did not participate in the practice. Otherwise, he could join the 9 Palaces sword formation now and form the 10 Directions sword formation. With him joining, the power will be even greater. Big 9 swords tried their best to stop Lu Haijun, and the fight was very difficult. In an emergency, Wu Yu fell from a high altitude and intercepted Lu Haijun on his way to Fengxiu Cliff. We must not let him pass. The Lord of the Six Seas used the ghost harpoon to fight the 9 Palaces sword formation. He did not accept it head-on. Instead, he used ghost cultivation skills, constantly changing, summoning ghosts, and using the yin bell net to resist, dragging the 9 Palaces sword formation along the way. Approaching the snowy cliff. I'm afraid the hearts of all the forces from all directions are hanging here. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Wu Yu, seeing Wu Yu, Mr. Lu Hai smiled ferociously. Both Ghost Ji and an Entropy Lord died because of Wu Yu. Wu Yu is a very key figure in this battlefield today. This made him even more excited. The ghost harpoon flew and stabbed on the ground. Suddenly, dozens of evil ghosts emerged from the ground. The stench filled the sky and the evil spirit rolled. There were also dozens of wronged souls, which were difficult to remove with Taoism. Entering the bodies of Tongtian elders will have a huge impact on them. Buzz. Evil ghosts are easily torn into pieces, but those innocent souls are difficult to deal with, and must be killed by Lu Haikun. Seeing that Mr. Lu Hai was about to break out of the siege, Wu Yu knew that he could not face him alone. At the critical moment, when everyone's hearts were probably in their throats, Wu Yu suddenly saw Zhang Ding and Dongfang Qinghua, who were tied up in the distance, watching a show with a sneer. Without saying a word, Wu Yu raised his sword to the sky, and in a blink of an eye, he lifted the Dongfang Qinghua high into the sky and appeared in front of Zhang Xie and the others. Zhang Xie, withdraw from the 10,000 sword formation immediately, otherwise, Dongfang Qinghua University will die. As long as they withdraw, Feng Xia and the others can escape a little, Liu Haijun will only die, and they will be able to survive this crisis. Zhang Xie looked up and gritted his teeth. He did hesitate for a while, but this was their great opportunity. For a moment, he continued to attack with his head covered, tearing apart the 10,000 sword formation, trying to rush forward. It seemed that Dongfang Qinghua University was far less valuable than this opportunity in Zhang Xie's heart, so keeping it would have no effect. Wu Yu turned his fingers into a sword. Wu Yu, don't. Dongfang Qinghua was so frightened that his face turned pale and his whole body was shaking, but he was completely trapped. Master, save me. The great disciple of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, who was as dignified as Wan Tianyuxiu, had a tragic voice and was crying under Wu Yu's control. The disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect in the distance looked at each other and felt a little worried. After all, Zhang Xie had no intention of saving this eldest disciple. It's a pity that your master is nothing. Wu Yu knew that if it were Feng Shui, he would definitely do this and ignore his life. Tear. Wu Yu killed Dongfang Qinghua in front of everyone, threw his body and flew towards the 10,000 swords formation. In an instant, the corpse turned into a rain of blood in the 10,000 sword formation, falling down and raining on Zhang Xie and the others' heads. Qinghua University. Zhang Xie shouted angrily, his face turned purple with anger, and his magic power rolled around, blasting a big crater around him. Wu Yu and he looked at each other, with only indifference in their eyes. When he lowered his head, the Liu He Lord still wanted to approach Feng Xia and the others, so Wu Yu lifted Zhang Ding up, and Zhang Ding's hands and feet were severed by Feng Xia. Naturally, he couldn't resist Wu Yu. Boy, you dare to kill me? Zhang Ding's eyes were cold and his expression was ferocious, like a ghost, and extremely scary. I'll just kill you, okay? Wu Yu carried him up to the sky. He wanted to see if Dongfang Qinghua University was not good enough. What role did Zhang Ding play in Zhang Xie's heart? Could it be a hostage? If not, there is no use keeping it. Keep this Zhangding just for this time. Rushing into the sky, Wu Yu said to Zhang Xie while everyone was dumbfounded, I'll give you 3 breaths to stop attacking immediately and lead the demons and ghost cultivators out of the 10,000 swords array. Otherwise, Zhangding will be the next Oriental Tsinghua University. Wu Yu, Zhang Xie roared, causing even the clouds in the sky to tremble. This was a great opportunity for the 3 of them, but Wu Yu used hostages to force him and killed Dongfang Tsinghua University. Zhang Xie lost his respectable side. Now he is his biological brother and the pillar of the Xuanhuan Dao sect. 1. Wu Yu was talking nonsense to him. Zhang Xie was so angry that he made a decision and said to the 9 immortals, everyone, there are many opportunities, so don't quit first. Tian Yujun actually smiled and said, don't be frightened and confused, Master Zhang. You must understand that if Zhangding falls into their hands, he will die. If you are afraid of Zhangding's death, we will attack you thousands of times. Gotta get out. Zhu Xian said, Tian Yujun is right, I am not willing to quit this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If they are afraid of Zhangding's death, the sword cultivators can threaten Zhangding countless times. Wu Yu didn't expect that demons and ghost cultivators would not listen to Zhang Xie. The most important thing is that after Zhang Xie heard this, his eyes changed several times, and finally he raised his head coldly and said to Zhangding, brother, we can only do it again in the next life. Heaven-swallowing record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 155. Hearing this, everyone was in an uproar. They didn't expect Zhang Xie to be so cruel and ruthless, even sacrificing his own brothers. This kind of courage is really amazing. Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. Zhangding laughed loudly and said, Zhang Xie, I can only say one thing, your grandson will not die a good death. At this juncture, the brothers were actually yelling at each other, which was really eye-opening. Today, Zhang Xie doesn't even care about his brother's life in order to break the 10,000 sword formation, and Zhangding has lost its use. Wu Yu, let me go, and I will block the Liuhe Lord for you. Why? Zhangding said suddenly. This is gambling. Wu Yu looked at him coldly. This matter must be decided by Feng Xia. However, Wu Yu was worried that even Feng Xia would be confused. This Zhangding, although he hates Zhang Xie at this time, he is not a good person. Wu Yu absolutely does not trust him. Once he has freedom and is still inside the Bibo Mountains, he will be more terrifying than Lord Liuhe. It's impossible. Wu Yu's fingers condensed into a long sword, resolute and decisive, and cut his throat with one sword. Zhangding didn't expect that when he took the initiative to show his kindness, what he got was Wu Yu's determined killing. Buzz. His body followed in the footsteps of Tsinghua University in the east. I didn't expect that the leader of the Xuanhuan Dao sect would be such a thing. He could even kill his own brothers, let alone others. As a disciple of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, you should feel ashamed. Wu Yu used Zhangding's death to incite the Xuanhuan Dao sect's military morale. The effect is definitely there, especially among some young disciples. The eyes of some young disciples have changed a lot when they look at Zhang Xie. They no longer have the kind of respect from the heart, but only awe. What's bigger is fear. However, even then, the threat of Lord Liuhe has not been resolved. Wu Yu no longer cares about so much, and directly leaps down, holding the black and white Dao sword with both hands, intercepting it in front of Lord Liuhe. Once Lord Liuhe has if he shows signs of breaking out of the 9 palace sword formation, Wu Yu will intercept him. Everyone's hearts became tense again. Could it be that the final life and death fight was about to begin? Wu Yu. That night Tian Yuxiu suddenly shouted. It turned out that more than a dozen innocent souls suddenly rushed into his body, which greatly affected him. Lord Luhai seized this opportunity and found the exit of the 9 palaces sword array with a sinister smile. The ghost harpoon stabbed him. It was snowing at night, and he flew past. In front of him, there was Wu Yu, who was ready. "A big gift for you." Mr. Liuhe suddenly laughed, obviously already prepared to deal with Wu Yu outside. The ghost harpoon was put away, and the yin bell net suddenly rose into the air. At the same time as the copper bell rang, the yin bell net was used as a hood in front of Wu Yu, and wrapped Wu Yu to death, and the Liuhe Lord instantly changed into "Can you surpass him and truly fight towards Feng Xiu Cliff? Enjoy it." Mr. Lu Hai was more difficult to deal with than Wu Yu imagined, especially the yin bell net. The sound of the copper bell had a stimulating and psychedelic effect. When he regained consciousness, his body was completely caught by the yin bell net. It was difficult to move for a while. If it were not for the indestructible body, the flesh and blood would probably be crushed to pieces. What's even more frightening is that just when Wu Yu wanted to tear open the net of yin bells, dozens of pitch-black, scorpion-like ghost insects suddenly emerged from the dozens of copper bells, biting open them. Wu Yu's flesh and blood desperately wanted to penetrate into his body. That kind of terror and pain is not something ordinary people can bear. The methods of ghost cultivators can sometimes be so cruel. Wu Yu has finally seen that, compared with the Lord of the Six Seas, that ghost girl is really nothing. If it weren't for Wu Yu's indestructible body, those ghost insects wouldn't still have half of his body blocking the outside, but would rush in and eat all his internal organs. In an instant, Wu Yuxiu smelled the smell of death. "The severe pain all over my body is more terrifying than forging the inner Vajra Buddha." He saw Wan Tian Yuxiu and 9 of them chasing after them with red eyes. He saw Mr. Liuhe smiling proudly, crossing him, preparing to complete the final blow. He could even see the young disciples of the Tongtian sword sect in the distance, looking uneasily and anxiously at this side, looking at him. What is responsibility? What is love? What is morality? For a moment, Wu Yu realized that he was so unwilling to admit defeat. "No. I won't lose. I won't die. I don't want to. I won't give in. There is hatred and rage in my heart. Even if you are going to die, you still need someone to support you." At that moment, time seemed very slow. When he lowered his head, he could see ghost insects all over his body, tearing flesh and blood. See the tentacles, sharp teeth, and claws of the ghost insect. Extremely poisonous mouth parts. Seeing the contempt in Mr. Liuhe's eyes, seeing his pride. Seeing the uneasiness, grief, anger, and pain of the elders. In his mind and heart, the anger erupted like a volcano and surged through his body, making his whole body burn. In a trance, he saw the unparalleled Monkey King bathed in golden flames. He was aloof, scornful, domineering, rebellious, and irritable, but he had morality in his heart. What is a ghost cultivator? Great sage. In a daze, I saw him smile contemptuously, open his mouth and blow, but nothing moved. Stabilization technique. At that moment, he was so blessed that he suddenly turned his head, and when Lu Haijun passed over him, he breathed on him. Wu Yu is at the 6th level of the Qi condensation realm, and this Lu Haijun is at the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm. Among the 3 realms, the effect of the body holding technique is very weak. However, even if it was only for a moment, in the light of the carbide fire, the 9 palace sword formation instantly caught up with him and enveloped him. Just because Mr. Lu Hai was unpredictable, he was frozen for a moment, and he clearly felt the moment when he could not move. Even the beating of the heart stopped. Wow! Several sword cultivation techniques passed through his chest, and the golden blizzard sword energy directly broke his right arm. At that moment, he was afraid that he would no longer be able to control the yin bell net. Wu Yu suddenly opened the yin bell net, and the black and white Taoist sword quickly killed the ghost insects that were still exposed one by one. Due to the instantaneous change, Lord Liuhe was once again surrounded by the 9 palace sword formation, and fell into a complete collapse. After Wu Yu got rid of the ghost insects on his body, he could see that Lord Liuhe was riddled with holes, not only broken, he lost his arm and one foot. Now he looked miserable and stared at Wu Yu, roaring, "What kind of Taoist technique did you use to make me unable to move? It's impossible." How could Wu Yu tell him that it was the 72 transformations? Kill him. The 9-sword cultivators seized this opportunity. Even if Mr. Liuhe resisted frantically and the severely injured people were still unable to stop the 9 people from the 8th level of Qi condensation realm from killing violently. As long as Mr. Liuhe is not dead, the crisis will still be there. Wu Yu joins in without saying a word. The newly born yin and yang sword. There were 2 sword energy in total, one in front of the other, and they consumed all Wu Yu's last mana. This is almost the most powerful killing move that can be launched at the 8th level of Qi condensation realm. Among the sword shadows in the sky, Mr. Liuhe only blocked the first one, but let the second one pass between his eyebrows. He died on the spot and fell to his knees. The last time he looked at Wu Yu, he still looked puzzled and unwilling. His eyes were so wide that he knelt down and smashed it to the ground. "Rikai-kun, die." One of the elders picked up the body of Mr. Liuhe and raised it high. For a moment, the fiery battlefield finally calmed down. The death of Mr. Liuhe means that the Tongtian sword sect is safe again and can survive for a while, maybe a day, or a few days. Perhaps only people nearby knew that the reason why Mr. Liuhe was negligent and was taken advantage of by the Zhigong sword formation was all because of Wu Yu. Now that the battle was won, everyone sat down on the ground exhausted. The 10 people looked at each other, feeling as if they were in another world. It's not easy to surround and kill a person at the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm. Moreover, the opponent is not willing to fight and only wants to break out of the encirclement, which makes it even more difficult to deal with. Old 6. The 7 ghosts of the Red Sea naturally saw their brother die on the spot. For a time, the 7 ghosts of Shihei suffered a huge blow. He was about to succeed, but suddenly fell short. Even Zhang Xie and Zhu Xian were shocked for a moment. They saw with their own eyes that Mr. Liuhe suddenly changed and was reversed and killed. The whole process only lasted a moment. Tongtian Sword Sect. The 7 ghosts of the Red Sea had bloodshot eyes, and their anger and hatred towards the Tongtian Sword Sect had increased by 3 points. Feng Xia and the others did not give them a chance to feel sentimental. Now that the internal worries were resolved, they continued to command the 10,000 sword formation without saying a word, taking advantage of the victory to pursue and kill Zhang Xie and the others. This battle is temporarily won. In fact, Su Yanli, Mo Shishu and the others had been watching the battle not far away. When they saw the invincible power of the Lord of the Six Seas, their hearts tightened. Now that they had killed him, they all cheered and burst into tears for their victory. Orbit. The terrifying battle of life and death was suppressed again, and they were safe again. Although we still can't see the light, at least we haven't fallen into hell yet. In the midst of tears, they still saw Wu Yu. Maybe many people didn't know that it was him who turned the tide this time, but to Wu Yu, this was not important. The confrontation with Mr. Lu Hai made him more aware that he still had great weaknesses compared with the top experts around him. Several ghost insects have already penetrated into the body, biting the flesh and blood. The body was bulging in several pieces, which was quite scary. Junior brother, hold back. Wan Tianyugzio was about to stab the ghost bug in his body directly with the long sword from the outside. This kind of ghost bug makes even their scalp numb when they see it. Need not. Wu Yu thought of another way. He sat cross-legged on the ground and directly recited the Inner Diamond Sutra. For a moment, golden light erupted from his body, and a large number of golden words appeared in his body. He began to forge and hone, and those ghosts and insects were instantly surrounded by golden words, with nowhere to escape, strangled to pieces. However, Wu Yu was seriously injured this time. Fortunately, Wan Tianyugxia once gave Wu Yu a Giwan pill. Wu Yu took the Giwan pill, and his indestructible body was very powerful. After a day, he returned to a relatively complete state, full of energy and vitality. Abundant. When he opened his eyes, he saw the 10,000 sword formation turbulent. Even so, Feng Xiya and the others were still persisting. They had no choice but to turn this land into a river of blood. This principle means that if you attack a city and defend the city, you will defend the people. Maybe Feng Xiya and the others are waiting for something, but it is said that it is illusory, so they still believe that they are more realistic. Wu Yu, do you want to rest? Su Yanli was taking care of him that day. Seeing him wake up, she smiled softly, as pure as a flower blooming in early spring. No. Wu Yu stood up and Yujian led her to the spiritual energy fountain. Facing the rising sun, he continued to forge the inner Vajra Buddha without saying a word. How much she could improve now depends on her fate. After the battle with Lu Haijun, Wu Yu's mentality has changed. It has become purer, more persistent, and more in line with the state of mind of the inner Vajra Buddha. He accidentally discovered that the speed at which the inner Vajra Buddha grows taller has actually increased. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 156. The meaning of Vajra is that the heart is extremely calm and the intention is extremely concentrated. Suddenly, I discovered that the second level of forging the indestructible body was not as simple as enduring pain and training for a long time. Sometimes, the understanding, transformation and change of the heart are also important. After experiencing life and death, passing through the gate of hell, and now going through this boring and difficult process, Wu Yu had a different understanding. A strong body requires a strong mind. Only with a strong mind and a Vajra ambition can one have a Vajra body. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow circled M. The aspiration of Vajra, unwavering in life and death, tempered with one heart, reaches the heavens and the earth. All the good and evil in the world come from my heart. Wu Yu did not expect that one day, he would be able to enter a magical state even while reciting the Inner Vajra Sutra painfully and proudly. It turns out that the highest state is not to endure hardships, but to enjoy them. This is a kind of detachment. It is a process from reverse to smooth. For example, when ghosts and insects enter the body, using the Inner Vajra Sutra to strangle them is a kind of compliance. Forging the physical body and pursuing the Vajra is not a kind of pain, but a transcendent baptism of the physical body, which is the inner rebirth. In this way, Wu Yu's soul was so blessed that he didn't know how much time had passed. He only knew that the speed at which he was reciting the Inner Vajra Sutra was constantly accelerating. Sometimes, he was immersed in a golden vortex and forgot the passage of time. The golden whirlpool was the same as the river and the sea, and was baptizing him. He drifted with the current in this golden whirlpool, gradually becoming one with the whirlpool, and even becoming a whirlpool himself. Perhaps only the people next to him can notice that he used to recite Buddhist sutras less than 10 times a day, but now, he may recite dozens or even hundreds of times. Boom! Suddenly, everyone saw a huge Buddha statue outside Wu Yu's body. The Buddha statue continued to grow and shine, until one day, it grew to a height of 4 feet. Buzz! The Buddha statue disappeared, and everyone looked at Wu Yu in disbelief. What could be clearly felt was that he had become stronger again, especially physically. There was no doubt that after the transformation of his mind, his indestructible body was stronger than imagined. Reached the 4th floor faster. I'm afraid I have to thank Mr. Rikai for this. Today's Wu Yu has a huge body of flesh and blood, unprecedented and rare in the world. Regardless of his magical power, 1,000 wind and snow cliffs are probably no match for Wu Yu. With just one move of his hand, he has the power to move mountains and fill seas. That diamond body was like an iron diamond. When you open your eyes, you will feel a stinging sensation. Therefore, when Wu Yu broke through, everyone around him stayed away and did not dare to look directly at Wu Yu. Everyone's eyes were filled with envy, respect, and shock. The golden color on his body gradually receded, and Wu Yu opened his eyes. As expected, his body reached an unprecedented state. The masculine energy swept across the blue waves of the mountains, fearing that the 1,000-year-old fox demon outside the 10,000 sword formation. You can all smell this extremely strong and domineering atmosphere. The same sun is buried here in the Bibo Mountains. Wu Yu felt the changes in his body, smiled slightly at the people around him, then sat down cross-legged and took out more than 30 qi condensing pills. He is preparing to condense the 7th spiritual aperture and step into the 7th level of qi condensation realm. The 7th spiritual aperture is located on the soleace of both feet and is called Yongquan Point. The Yongquan Point is connected to the earth, so it is so important. In the earth, the spiritual energy and essence pass through the Yongquan Point and directly gather in the Yongquan Point Dharma source. It is said that to condense the Yongquan Point Dharma source, as long as you stand on the earth, mana recovery will be much faster. Everyone could only watch in astonishment as Wu Yu put the qi condensation pills into his mouth one after another like a Pac-Man, quickly refining them, and watched as his magic power continued to improve. Because his magic power comes faster, Wu Yu needs a stronger body to suppress it. For ordinary people, refining the qi condensing pill like this is simply asking for death. It takes a month to refine a qi condensing pill. Not bad. The qi condensing pills from Xuanhuan Daozong entered Wu Yu's body one by one. The magic source of Yongquan Point was formed at an unprecedented speed. Wu Yu suppressed all its riots and restlessness with a stronger body. To be honest, his magic power is much more violent than others, but in addition to the indestructible body, Wu Yu also has another high-level heavenly magic. This magic source is constructed with high-level heavenly magic. It is majestic, perfect, and simply ghostly. Intolerable. It is precisely because of this that even if the opponent gets stronger and stronger, Wu Yu can almost keep defeating the opponent by 2 levels. Soon after, he successfully condensed qi and finally entered the 7th level of qi condensation realm. At this time, Su Yanli had just begun to construct the 6th magic source. Mo Shishu is still far from reaching the 7th level of qi condensation realm. Hey, it's so embarrassing. If this continues, I'll be embarrassed to call you my junior brother. Mo Shishu's face drooped, and he was about to cry without tears. Everyone surrounded him, admiring Wu Yu to the point of admiration. Wu Yu saw that Su Yanli also envied him and was happy for him, but his eyes looked like Wu Yu's, looking at his younger brother. It is a kind of satisfaction and a kind of pride. It's time for me to go put some effort in. Wu Yu finally had the confidence to say this. In the past few days, the 10,000 sword formation was at its end. Although no one rushed in, even the handyman disciples could see that the 10,000 sword formation was extremely unstable. Someone said that the 10,000 sword formation could not last for 3 days. Master. When Wu Yu came to the Wanjian stone gate, Zhang Xie and the others went to rest at this time, but Feng Shui and the others were still maintaining the operation of the Wanjian formation and could not get the full rest that Zhang Xie and the others had. Occasionally, a few elders and Wan Tianyuxiu and the others could go up and maintain it for a while. When they saw Wu Yu, each of them had an expression of relief on their faces. Feng Shui just noticed the movement over there and asked, "But is there a breakthrough?" Everyone is waiting for this answer. They did not expect that Wu Yu would make another breakthrough about a month after entering the 6th level of qi condensation realm. Condensing the acupoints naturally becomes more difficult as you go to the later stage, because the more mana you have to control, the harder it becomes, and there are also mutual impressions. Generally speaking, normal people will take it slower and slower, or even take decades. On the contrary, Wu Yu was miraculously getting faster and faster. Yes, Master Wu Yu became more restrained, and the withdrawal brought some changes to his personality. Hearing this affirmative answer, everyone showed a knowing smile even at this moment when they almost lost their light. Today, bad news is constantly coming from the Wanjian formation. The Tongtian sword sect is in doom, and only Wu Yu has been giving them bring good news. What are your plans? Feng Shui knew that Wu Yu would not come without any trouble. They said that the 10,000 sword formation could not last 3 days. Wu Yu looked up at him. Maybe, it might be 2 days, it might be 4 days. But it makes no difference. It's almost the limit of holding on until now. After holding on for a few months, Feng Xiao lost a lot of weight. Facing his own people, he no longer felt it's not as difficult to approach as before, but it's much gentler. Wu Yu understood. He glanced at everyone and said, Master, give me another 3 days, I want to make some changes. Do you want to go to Xuanhuan Dao sect again? Feng Shui guessed. That's right. This time, I'm afraid I'm going to defeat Zhang Ji. Will it work if I try the same method twice? Lan Huayun couldn't help but ask pessimistically. Yes, it might be difficult to use, so everyone was more rational about Wu Yu's decision. Du Yu Feng Xia said, I believe in you, no matter what, just do it. It will take 3 days, then we will hold on for 3 days. We will wait until you return. Master and disciple looked at each other, saying nothing. Wu Yu didn't say much. He needed 3 days, which was enough. Next, it would depend on whether he had the expected harvest during this trip. Wu Yu. The moment he turned around, Feng Xia suddenly stopped him, and then threw a pitch-black rope-like object about 1 foot long. Wu Yu took a closer look and saw that it turned out to be a rattan with black branches and leaves. There are many barbs, extremely sharp. This is a magic weapon. This is Zhangding's Moyun Vine. There are 2 magic weapon arrays inside. One is the strengthening array, which can make the Moyun Vine stronger than most magic weapons. The second is the growth array. It can make this Moyun Vine grow 500 feet in an instant. It is a good magical weapon. Zhangding is the 10th level of the Qi condensation realm and the second largest figure in the Xuanhuan Dao section. How can his magical weapon be simple? At least it is much better than the country and mountain map and deathly gourd in Wu Yu's hands now. Most people would have a binding type of magic weapon to imprison their opponents, but Wu Yu didn't have one. It was just the right time for Feng Shui to give Zhangding's magic weapon to him. Use it well. Yes, Master Wu Yu put away the Moyun Vine. This was Feng Shui's high expectations for him, and he could not live up to it. Junior brother, I'm jealous of your Moyun Deng. It's a good treasure, so I can't treat it badly, Wan Tianyugzio said with a smile. He is also true-hearted, but he wants it in his heart, and he won't hide it. He is more suitable for you, Wan Tianyugzio said sincerely. I will not disappoint my senior brother carrying their expectations. Wu Yu set off again. On this day, he galloped at full speed and flew with his sword. Long winds and waves. 1 day later, he appeared in the sky above Zhongyuan Daozong, dominating the world. Below is Yang'an Underground Palace. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 157. Chapter 156. The Murderous Intention of the Avenue. Once again, I came to Zhongyuan Fairy Mountain. There is only one exit in the Yang'an Underground Palace below, which is a rock gate leading to the underground palace, made of several huge rocks. When Wu Yu arrived, Zhang Ji was playing with a few young female disciples in front of the rock gate. His laughter was sinister. Was he trying to take advantage of those delicate and bright-colored female disciples and offend me? People giggled. It is well known that Zhang Ji is dissolute, but what he did not expect is that during the current war between the 4 parties, he, who is in charge of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, is still like this. Wu Yu was also eye-opened. These few were clearly disciples of the immortal way. They had the cultivation of qi condensation realm and were no weaker than immortal Haoshan. However, under Zhang Ji's grasp, they acted like girls from a brothel. It can only be said that the ethos of the Xuanhuan Dao sect is very different from that of the Tongtian sword section. It is a pity that this place is still known as the Dao Orthodox School. Third Master, there is someone in the sky. It's Wu Yu. In Xuanhuan Daozong, except for Zhang Ji, everyone else has been frightened by Wu Yu for a long time. There are still many injuries lying in the Yong'an underground palace. Therefore, when those women saw Wu Yu, their faces were as white as paper with fright. They rolled and crawled, and hid in the Yong'an underground palace in extreme embarrassment. Don't be afraid, Before Zhang Ji could finish his words, the female disciples hid in the Yong'an underground palace. Their reaction was to slap him hard. When he was happy, Wu Yu unexpectedly came to disturb him again. Without him having to raise his head, Wu Yu fell from a high altitude and suddenly hit the rocky ground in front of him. The rocky ground was dozens of feet long and wide, and cracked instantly. For a moment it felt like the earth was shaking. Wu Yu, Zhang Ji stared intently, with a cold face, and a burst of anger in his chest. The scene of the cholera in Xuanhuan Dao sect last time, when he was scolded bloody by Zhang Xie, is still vivid in his mind. I didn't expect to meet so soon. Wu Yu's expression was silent. Facing this older generation cultivator at the 9th level of the qi condensation realm, his aura was not weak at all. Now he divided the black and white Dao sword with a click. He formed two swords, flipped his hands, and the sword power rose. Without saying a word, he walked towards Zhang Ji step by step. Seeing his posture, Zhang Ji actually wanted to start a war with him. He actually smiled and said, "It must be that your Tongtian sword sect has been destroyed. You, a bastard, escaped and wanted to take revenge on me, right? No wonder you, this poor little thing, have lost all reason. It is said that you are a disciple of Feng Xia. Did Feng Xia get ripped apart by my elder brother? Did Lan Huayun be defiled by the 7 ghosts of Shihe? Did all your fellow disciples belong to the Xuanhuan Dao sect? Did the disciples get slaughtered and eaten by the demons? Did your fellow disciples, my disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, go to heaven?" After saying that, Zhang Ji laughed wildly, leaning forward and back, with a proud look on his face. In the Yong'an underground palace, many disciples poked their heads out. When they heard Zhang Ji's words, they couldn't help but cheered. "Third Master, look at Wu Yu's stinky face. What you said must be true. Maybe it's a certain senior sister he loves who is favored by us senior brothers. Otherwise, why would his face look so bad? The Bibo Mountains must be littered with corpses now. I really want to see them and kill some sword cultivators." Wu Yu's eyes moved towards them. He was not angry after hearing these sarcastic comments. The minds of dignified ascetics are filled with burning, killing, robbing, raping and plundering all day long, which is undoubtedly the dark side of mortals in the world. How can such a person achieve Taoism and become an immortal? How is it possible for such a person to achieve anything in cultivation? When standing at a certain height, even if his strength is not superior, Wu Yu can feel the pity of these people. They will never be able to come into contact with the real Tao. Watch carefully, this Wu Yu caused us so much trouble last time. Today we stewed him and threw him to the western mountains to feed the ants." When Zhang Ji said this, he proudly took out the magic weapon. It was a long knife with a green dragon pattern on the knife, which spread to the handle and was lifelike. In the eyes of the green dragon, there were two formations. Vaguely among them, there seemed to be huge waves. The magical weapon is called Qing Long Sword, and its power is no less than that of Wu Yu's black and white Taoist sword, but it is not as exquisite as the black and white Taoist sword. As Zhang Ji laughed, the 9 sources and mana in his body rolled. For a moment, the momentum was overwhelming, like the waves of the sea, moving towards Wu Yu to suppress them. For a moment, the waves were surging. Sensing Zhang Ji's movement, the disciples in Yong'an underground palace laughed and cheered. Last time Zhang Ji couldn't catch Wu Yu. This time Wu Yu came to his door. How could Zhang Ji be polite? He must be mad because his sect was destroyed. The third master must take this opportunity to kill Wu Yu. For a time, there were thousands of disciples in the Yong'an underground palace, all cheering for Zhang Ji, with contemptuous smiles on their faces. Perhaps in their hearts, this invasion was over, and they, the Xuanhuan Dao sect, were a complete victory. Little did they know that Wu Yu moved faster and fiercer. Whoosh! He held two swords, like a black and white whirlwind. In the black and white, the golden magic power swept majestically. Although it was not as powerful as Zhang Ji in total, Wu Yu had physical power. When combined, the momentum was overwhelming. The newly born yin and yang sword. This combination of killing moves is certainly simple, but when it comes forward, there are two whooshing sounds. The two seemingly simple but actually terrifying sword energy whizzes away. For a moment, the air vibrates and a roaring sound is heard, scaring the disciples of the Yong'an underground palace. Shocked in his heart, he quickly retreated. Look at me. Among the elders at the 9th level of the Qi condensation realm, Zhang Ji is indeed extremely powerful. His green dragon sword instantly turned into huge waves and water columns in his hands, spinning around his body. If you look closely, you can see that the water column was made of densely packed blades. Immediately after the Taoist spell was cast, a dragon roar was heard. The huge water column turned into a green dragon and rushed out with a crash. It was 10 feet long and soared into the sky. The giant beast with such majesty, it suppressed everything. That proud dragon had destroyed the rocks along the way. With the huge power of the mountain, the waves of the angry sea rushed towards Wu Yu. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Zhou Qinglong, use the sea turning technique. Zhang Ji had used this technique before, almost knocking down Wu Yu who was flying with a sword, and crushing Wu Yu. Now he used the same technique again, but compared to Wu Yu's newborn yin and yang sword, it was really weak. The angry dragon posture made the Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples extremely excited and crowded out one after another. Call. At that moment, two sword energy pierced the Qinglong's mouth, penetrating all the way. In the light of the calcium carbide fire, Wu Yu's sword soared into the sky, and he passed by the angry green dragon. The majestic waves made him roll to the ground, and his body was shaken to a certain extent, but in fact, it had no impact on his indestructible body. After all, this injury is nothing. But Zhang Ji underestimated Wu Yu's swordsmanship. He used Zhou Qinglong to reverse a qi sword, which had a certain effect. One of the sword qi cut off his fingers, and the other sword qi rushed into the Yong'an underground palace, stringing together at least 10 of the front disciples. Under the raging sword qi, 10 of them were killed. Several disciples were injured, and some died directly, causing a huge commotion for a while. Screams resounded throughout the sky. Wu Yu quickly jumped up, his eyes were cold, and the killing god came towards Zhang Ji again. Today, after the Taoist duel just now, Zhang Ji is still in shock. He greatly underestimated the power of Wu Yu's swords, causing him to break 3 fingers and kill several disciples. This would cause him great loss of face in front of his disciples. There was a complete commotion in the Yong'an underground palace. The disciples who had been shouting just now looked miserable and hid in the depths of the Yong'an underground palace in an uproar. Only a few of them were brave enough to shout for Zhang Ji. After all, Wu Yu and Zhang Ji's battle is not over yet. A Taoist spell made Zhang Ji completely put away his arrogance and face Wu Yu again with an extremely cautious attitude. Even when he saw Wu Yu's cold eyes, he felt a little shaken in his heart. When did this junior start to be so terrible? How could Feng Xiya accept such a terrifying disciple? Many panic thoughts flashed through my mind. In fact, Wu Yu could clearly see that Zhang Ji's broken finger grew back at a speed visible to the naked eye. Recover. It must be a fairy root like Shenshenkuo. Zhang Ji's recovery ability is very strong. Wu Yu guessed. Otherwise, his fingers would not have recovered so quickly. After his fingers grew out, Zhang Ji shouted loudly and took action again. The long sword changed and swept across. Invisibly, a real stormy wave was set off, sweeping over. The terrifying impact was like a mountain falling from the sky. Wu, the mountains behind you will probably be washed down by huge waves. The 9th level of Qi condensation realm is not a simple role. Wu Yu looked up at the huge wave of swords, showing no fear, and even had a sneer on his lips. When he was charging forward, he suddenly put the black and white Dao swords together and turned them into a sword, but at this time he was holding the sword with both hands and raising it high. Immortal Ape Transformation. At that moment, his body grew taller and turned into a golden ape. Golden anger surged and burned on his body, even burning on the black and white Dao sword. Visualizing the mind ape, his mind is peaceful. The huge waves in front of him are just the evolution of Taoism and cannot scare Wu Yu. He saw Zhang Ji at a glance. At this time, he was possessed by the Monkey King, his eyes were shining with golden light, and he slashed down the black and white Taoist sword in his hand with shock. At the moment of slashing, a golden sword beam of more than 10 feet stretched out from the black and white Taoist sword. It was almost like what Wu Yu was holding. A super giant sword more than 10 feet long. The giant sword soared into the sky. 50 people stacked it up so high, the same golden mountain peak soared into the sky. Cut! The giant sword was slashed violently. For a moment, the mana was in chaos and collapsed everywhere. That stunning sword slashed through the giant wave and split it into 2 halves. At the same time, Zhang Ji, who was in the giant wave, was neatly divided into 2 halves and flew out. Ah! Zhang Ji was stunned and screamed in panic, but at the most panicked moment, he lost his life. Boom! The giant sword fell and tore a huge crack in the ground. The gate of the Yong'an underground palace was also cut in half, and a large piece collapsed. The disciples inside could only hide further inside while screaming. For more than a month, this golden sword technique of the great Dao has finally achieved some success. Wu Yu was very satisfied with the power of this golden sword technique. This sword technique was almost tailor-made for him. It was rough, direct, and destructive. With one sword strike, Zhang Ji was beheaded. Today, Zhang Ji died in a panic, leaving behind even more panic the disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao section. Heaven-swallowing record. Author, Feng Qingyang. Chapter 158. For Wu Yu, Zhang Ji's death in battle was inevitable. In terms of swordsmanship, he had the foundation planted by the yin-yang sword wheel, and the 2 sword cultivation techniques of the newborn yin-yang qi sword and the great Dao golden sword technique, which made him at least the sword master in the Tongtian sword sect. With the great mana of the 7th level of the Qi condensation realm, plus the inner Vajra Buddha of 4 feet high, the mana, the superposition of the flesh, and the immortal ape transformation, it was not a miracle to kill Zhang Ji directly, but an easy thing. Even if only 1 month had passed, it was still a different story. This is the difference between a genius and an ordinary cultivator. It was a pity that Zhang Ji only realized the horror of Wu Yu at the last moment before his death. As for the thousands of disciples in the Yong'an underground palace, they were naturally frightened and pissed themselves. When Wu Yu, a peer, walked into the closed Yong'an underground palace, they screamed, cried out in pain, trembled and retreated, people squeezed each other, people stepped on each other, and their faces were pale and miserable, without the courage to fight. Wu Yu's 2 visits had already brought them a mythical psychological trauma. Now everyone looked at this peer bathed in the golden magic light. When one person took the lead, they all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Wu Yu, spare us, don't kill us." It was Sect Master Zhang and the elders who wanted to capture your Tongtian sword section. We are just young disciples. We couldn't decide anything and didn't participate in it. Please have mercy and spare us. For a while, thousands of people knelt in front of Wu Yu and cried bitterly. But before Wu Yu and Zhang Ji fought, their ugly words had already exposed themselves. How could Wu Yu believe that these people were innocent? They were all weak, otherwise they would have reached the foot of the Bibo Mountains by now. Looking at these fearful and hypocritical faces, they were indeed Zhang Xie's disciples, and they were very similar to his sanctimonious appearance. Wu Yu couldn't help but think of the immortal Haoshan, and then he realized that Xuanhuan Dao sect had so many such people. Compared with the ironclad Tongtian sword sect, it was indeed shameful. Originally, I planned to use the same trick again to threaten Zhang Ji and these thousands of people, so that Zhang Xie had to rush back again, but if Zhang Xie came back, I still couldn't deal with him. I could only delay a little time. Now that Master gave me the Moyun Vine, I'm afraid it's also a hint for me to use a new method. The Moyun Vine is as hard as steel and has magic power, and it can extend 500 feet. When the other disciples begged for mercy, Wu Yu came to them and took out the Moyun Vine from the bag of magic. When the magic power was infused, the Moyun Vine suddenly grew wildly, spreading like a black giant snake, and even grew branches and sharp barbs, like a 500-foot-long iron whip in Wu Yu's hand. Seeing the Moyun Vine that originally belonged to Zhang Ding, the disciples were horrified. He wants to use the Moyun Vine. Before he finished speaking, Wu Yu rolled in his hand, and the Moyun Vine rolled like a giant snake, passing over the disciples who were fleeing in panic. Suddenly, it was like a big net that stopped thousands of people, and then it tightened directly. The Moyun Vine actually tied these thousands of disciples together in an instant, like a string, and thousands of people were entangled in this Moyun Vine in order. Ah! For a moment, thousands of people screamed desperately. That's because the more they struggled, the more the barbs on the vines and branches of the Moyun Vine would tighten and pierce into their flesh, causing dense wounds on their bodies. For a time, the entire Moyun Vine was stained red with blood. Terror, cruelty, struggle, and despair shrouded the heads of these thousands of people. Thousands of people became prisoners of Wu Yu. With the Moyun Vine, Wu Yu had such thoughts and actions. If I were you, you would be quiet and accept my judgment of you. If anyone screams loudly and bothers me, I will send him to the west directly. Wu Yu's calm voice was particularly harsh in the screams, and some of the Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples were frightened to incontinence. Wu Yu, you will not die well. Your Tongtian sword sect has been destroyed. Even if you hijack us, what's the use? You will die miserably. Our sect master will let you taste all the pain in the world. Among the thousands of people, there are always one or two who are not afraid of death and go against Wu Yu and shout wildly. Wu Yu tightened the Moyun Vine and strangled them directly. The shocking scene made the thousands of people tremble even more. They were all obedient. No one screamed again even though they were terrified. Come out. Wu Yu pulled the thousands of disciples that Zhang Xie wanted to protect out of the Yong'an underground palace like a group of animals. The scene was spectacular. However, no one knew what Wu Yu wanted to do. What was the point of kidnapping these 1,000 people in this place? Soon, Wu Yu gave the answer. He was silent, stretched out his hand, and the black and white swords formed a sword aura, allowing him to control the sword technique and float in the air. Wu Yu easily jumped up and pointed to the Tongtian sword section in an instant. He flew the sword into the sky without saying a word. Wow! The thousands of disciples suddenly understood Wu Yu's actions, and were so scared that they almost lost their souls. Sure enough, when Wu Yu rushed into the sky, thousands of disciples entangled with Moyandeng all flew up and hung high in the sky. Wu Yu actually carried so many disciples and flew into the sky towards the sky. Flying in the direction of the sword sect, even though it was carrying so many people, Wu Yu's flying speed with the sword was not much slower. This is the difference between flying with a sword and riding a crane. The crane can only withstand a few people at most, but it cannot fly. There are hundreds of thousands of handyman disciples and some outer disciples in Xuanhuan Immortal Mountain. Today, they saw a shocking scene. Someone was wielding a sword soaring into the sky, dragging thousands of Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples in their hands. The disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect were basically lying head down and feet up, tumbling in the air one by one, smashing through the clouds, falling to pieces, and screaming. Thousands of disciples were strung together, as if a huge meat skewer was flying in the sky. Oh my God! On that day, Wu Yu impacted the hearts of all the disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect. Let them truly realize what sword cultivation is. 3 days. Feng Shui's face was pale, cold sweat was flowing down his forehead, and the hands that controlled the 10,000 sword formation were trembling for a while. Looking at the other 8, the situation was even worse than that of Feng Xiucliffe. Some of them were already trembling under their feet and unable to stand steadily. In front of them, nearly 20 people were in the 10,000 sword formation, and they started a shocking showdown with Wang Jian. Every master is resisting the murderous intention of the sword and rushing upwards. Now that Wu Yu is not here, once 2 people rush in, or one of Jiangxia and the 9 Immortals, or even the 10th level of Qi condensation realm, these 10,000 people will rush in. The sword formation will completely collapse and die. At that time, everyone in the Tongtian sword sect will need to fight to the death with those 3 enemies. The closer they were to success, the crazier and more desperate Jiangxia and the others became, and of course, the more arrogant they became. The threats shook the Blue Mountains. The disciples of the Tongtian sword sect probably knew that the end was approaching, and those blood-boiling, the disciples who were determined to fight to the death had long been at the forefront, and even drew out their own magic weapons, long swords. Seeing that the 10,000 sword formation was shaking like a boat in the sea, the disciples knew that the 10,000 sword formation was exhausted. This war had persisted until now and it was time to see the end. Brothers and sisters, please don't be stingy with our forbidden Taoist skills today. As the leader of his disciples, Wan Tianyuxiu knew that it was especially important to inspire their hearts in this battle because they were the weak. Yes. Thousands of people roared, and the swords shone with thousands of lights. The disciples of the Tongtian sword sect had never been so murderous. Boom boom boom. Several large gaps were torn open in the 10,000 sword formation above the head. Fortunately, no one was overhead at this time, otherwise they would all have rushed in. Outside the 10,000 sword formation, the demons all over the mountains and plains have transformed into their true form, and their demonic aura is soaring into the sky. They are hidden in the mountains, forests, and rivers, which is the most terrifying place for the Tongtian sword sect. On the contrary, the disciples of Xuanhuan Dao sect, although they are all arrogant and domineering, they are not afraid. However, in fact, they were reminded that what is even more terrifying is the evil ghost army of the 7 Red Sea Ghosts. Although there are only 7 of the 7 Red Sea Ghosts, there are even only 6 now, but it is said that the older ones can pass. The ghost cultivation technique summons a large number of evil ghosts and ghosts to form a legion, which is not weaker than the demons and even the most terrifying opponents. If this were not the case, the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea would not be entitled to enjoy so many benefits. The army of demons, the army of evil ghosts and the unjust souls, and the disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, are all gearing up, looking at the fertile and aura-filled Blue Mountains with blood-red eyes. They are eager for today to come, and they have endured it for too long for today. For example, for demons, now is the time when they are the hungriest. In comparison, although the sword cultivators of the Tongtian sword sect are extremely murderous, they are obviously not capable of 3-party killing. In this 4-way battle between gods, 2 versus 2 is okay, but against 3, the Tongtian sword sect is almost in a deadlock. Headmaster, it's useless to hold on any longer. It's better to give up, save some strength, and fight one last time. Elder Muji only has the 9th level of Qi condensation realm and is the weakest here, so he can't hold on any longer. Muji is right. With the 10,000 sword formation in such a state, it would be better to start a battle directly and save some energy to kill a few more. He gritted his teeth, looked at the sky, and finally said, "Wait for another hour." 3 days have come, and the reason why he can hold on until now is because of his promise to Wu Yu. He didn't want Wu Yu to see that when he returned, he would see blue mountains and rivers of blood. /U003CE /U003E /U003CE /U003F. Follow the official QQ account 17K, ID, Love 17K, read early, and keep abreast of the latest information /U003C/E /U003E /U003C/E /U003E. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Fengqing Yang. Chapter 159. Mortals can either follow the path of immortals or the path of ghosts and gods. The way of ghosts and gods is bloody and cruel, ignores the merits of heaven, burns, kills, robs, and relies on the strong to bully the weak. However, although the immortal road war has been restrained, it really involves the interests of the section. For example, with the triple spiritual energy of the Bibo Mountains, it is not surprising that the Tongtian sword sect was wiped out by the whole sect. In the history of Dongsheng Shenzhou, the sects that were destroyed like this are as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River, and the geniuses who died on the road to immortality are endless. Geniuses really are nothing before they become masters. Like Wu Yu, if he failed after surviving this disaster, it is just a fallen leaf in this world, an ordinary death. That day, the world was in turmoil, and the Blue Mountains were shrouded in blood. The array of tens of thousands of swords could no longer stop the erosion of darkness and blood. Countless demons and even righteous disciples smelled the smell of blood and were unbearably anxious. They stared at the 10,000 sword formation. Once the 10,000 sword formation collapsed, they would rush forward crazily. Hurry up, I want to eat people, eat people. A ferocious tiger turned into a demon and roared on the mountain forest. Its huge body could definitely eat one in one bite. Sword repair dog. The end has come. Map, let's see who can kill more people. Compared to what? 10 Qi condensing pills. It's really worthless. I need at least 20. It's been agreed that when the time comes, I'll compete with the sword repair dog's head. No cheating. On the top of the peak, 2 disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect looked at each other and sneered. Under the earth, the loess is rolling, and in the vagueness, it seems that a legion is awakening. Boom. The 10,000 sword formation trembled again, even more exciting. Headmaster. Lan Huayun was a little unable to hold on, let alone the others. Now Zhang Xie and the others were attacking too hard. They needed 9 people to block nearly 20 people, which was really huge consumption. Give up. The 10,000 sword formation is at the end of its tether and is useless. Lan Huayun was the most unwilling to admit defeat, but she had no choice but to be convinced at this time. She knew that Feng Shui was waiting for Wu Yu, the disciple who rose up overnight. But nowadays, demons are in chaos, ghosts and gods are rampant, and even the Xuanhuan Dao sect, who is the righteous one, is murderous. What can Wu Yu do? Boom boom boom. The 10,000 sword formation is like a tall building, which is collapsing because its foundation has been damaged, kicking up dust all over the sky. In the shadow of the sword ahead, Zhang Xie's black and white monk's robes were rolling, and his saint-like smile made people want to tear his mouth apart. and the 9 immortals were hidden in the clouds and mist, and their laughter was simply soul-stirring. Before they entered the Bibo Mountains, they had already had a huge influence on the disciples of the Bibo Mountains. Those countless disciples could only muster a murderous aura to resist the charm of this 1,000-year-old fox demon. There are also 7 ghosts in the Red Sea, howling ghosts and wolves, surrounded by countless ghosts. Feng Xia, Lan Huayun, your goal has been reached in the shadow of the sword. Zhang Xia raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. Looking at this smile, it seems as if he has already stepped on this land, and this place already belongs to him. Zhang Xia, once the 10,000 sword formation is broken, you will be the first person I kill. Feng Shui suddenly raised his head, his eyes turned into sword blades, and he collided with Zhang Xia. For a moment, the flames of war rolled. Zhang Xia was still afraid of him, especially when he heard that he had practiced a golden elixir technique that could kill people invisibly. With one sword, he killed Lord Dark Entropy. Follow me, what are you bragging about? Zhang Xia laughed loudly, his laughter shaking the world. He suddenly became serious and shouted, disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect, listen to my orders, prepare to attack and kill the enemy. Tongtian sword. The sect is as weak as a dog and has no qualifications to occupy the blessed land of Bibo Mountains. These Bibo Mountains were given to our Xuanhuan Dao sect by God. Today, we, the righteous disciples, follow the will of heaven and earth and take back the Bibo Mountains that belong to us. He naturally figured out how to finally destroy the 10,000 swords formation. In fact, at this time, he had almost passed through the 10,000 swords formation and rushed in. The moment of life and death. At this moment, people forgot to breathe, and there was probably only blood in their eyes. For a moment, the world seemed to be still. And in the stillness, a voice seemed particularly loud. Sect Master Zhang, don't be anxious. That's Wu Yu's voice. In this moment of silence, it seemed so harsh that Zhang Xie forgot about the impact for a moment and looked up in shock. At that moment, he knew what hysterical anger was. Wu Yu descended from the sky, holding a huge whip in his hand. Thousands of people were tied to the whip. Their faces were as pale as paper, they were crying and howling, and even dripping with blood. When Wu Yu landed on the Wanjian stone gate, this one the disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect fell to the ground one after another, and for a while they screamed again and again. With a vigorous shake, Wu Yu managed to straighten the Moyun vines into a straight line, allowing the thousands of people to line up neatly in front of Zhang Xie. At that moment, everyone was even more suffocated. Only Feng Shui showed a knowing smile. The moment he asked him to hand over Moyun Ten to Wu Yu, he just wanted Wu Yu to do so. Wu Yu did not disappoint his hope and succeeded again. It was unimaginable that he actually flew with his sword and dragged thousands of people from the Xuanhuan Dao sect here. Zhang Xie, let me give you another gift. Wu Yu wrapped a corpse with a piece of cloth and threw it towards Zhang Xie. The cloth fell and the 2 halves of the corpse fell in front of Zhang Xie's eyes. It was his disciple Zhang Ji. What a pity. I killed 2 of your disciples, Zhang Ji and Zhang Ding, with my own hands. I also killed your 2 disciples, Dongfang Qinghua and Mo Xiudao, and your son Zhang Junlin. I killed you. I guess you hate me. At this time, Wu Yu became the only focus of the audience. I don't know why, when Wu Yu appeared like this, the disciples of the Tongtian sword sect saw hope and dawn again. Perhaps there was a seed called victory in their hearts. Before this, they never thought that they could really defend the Bibo Mountains. Tisk, tisk. At this time, even the 9 immortals and the 7 ghosts of Shihei stopped. They hadn't thought about it carefully before. Now after hearing what Wu Yu said, everyone couldn't help but look at Zhang Xie. He was a dignified Xuanhuan Dao section. The sect leader actually asked Wu Yu, a junior, to kill his brothers, sons, and apprentices with his own hands. Huh. Zhang Xie knew that anger would overwhelm his reason. He took a deep breath. Perhaps in his mind, these 5 lives were still within the scope of sacrifice compared with the dominance of Bibo Mountains. However, at this time, Wu Yu tightened the Moyanteng and shouted to Zhang Xie, I know that killing several brothers, sons, and disciples of Sect Master Zhang will definitely not matter to Sect Master Zhang. After all, Sect Leader Zhang is a beast, how can he know the feelings of the world? However, you are the sect leader after all, and you won't use the lives of thousands of elite disciples of Xuanhuan Dao sect to make fun of you? There are relatives, brothers, over there. Sect Master Zhang is a beast, so they can't be the same. Wu Yu's words were sarcastic and threatening. Now his Moyunvine is wrapped around the neck of each disciple, making them all kneel in front of Zhang Xie. As long as he exerts force, he will strangle the knot in one go. Thousands of heads, those people felt the crisis of death, and they were all scared to death, begging Zhang Xie to save them. Wu Yu, I haven't seen you for a while. You have gained a lot of abilities. The 9 immortals loomed out of the clouds and mist. Although they were veiled, those deep eyes were shaking Wu Yu's mind all the time. What does it have to do with you, an old witch? Wu Yu naturally hated her. Although she was ambiguous with him, she wanted to destroy the leader of the Tongtian sword sect. How can you say that to Juer? Juer is not happy. Juxian acted aggrieved and coquettishly in front of everyone. Wu Yu meditated on the mental ape, his mind was calm, and he was not affected by her. Instead, he looked at Zhang Xie and said in a firm voice, I will give you 3 breaths to withdraw from the 10,000 swords formation within 3 breaths. Otherwise, these thousands of people will be killed. The heads fell to the ground. You can ignore the lives of Zhang Xie, Zhang Ding, and Dongfang Qinghua, but you can't still be so stone-hearted for the sake of selfish desires and the future of your Xuanhuan Dao sect, right? There are many elders in Xuanhuan Daozong, and Wu Yu also wants to put pressure on them. If you want to play, play hard. 1. When Wu Yu warned loudly, Feng Shui and the others could just take a break. At this time, the 9 of them were seizing the time to recover themselves. The situation was left to Wu Yu, and they were relieved. Zhang Xieding was there, no. Wu Yu sneered, picked up the Nama Yundeng, and prepared to pull it. When he killed Dongfang Qinghua and Zhang Ding, he was determined. Therefore, he gave the other 3 parties the impression of decisive killing. Judging from his current state, there is almost a 90% chance that he will kill them. Killed these thousands of people. Zhang Xie is probably still struggling, but several elders around him and the disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect outside can't help it. There are their relatives and even the children of the elders here. Not everyone has Zhang Xie. Xie was so cold-blooded that for a while, at least a few elders nearby were advising Zhang Xie. Metropolitan. Metropolitan. Many disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect knelt down to beg for mercy. Sect Master, first stabilize this Wu Yu, and then think of a solution. Metropolitan. At this time, Wu Yu counted to 2 loudly. How exciting it is. The disciples of the Tongtian sword sect looked at him with fiery eyes, completely impressing Wu Yu. A few years ago, who would have thought that Wu Yu was still an insignificant handyman disciple? Metropolitan. Those elders had no choice but to drag Zhang Xie and let him leave the 10,000 swords formation. Zhang Xie should have relaxed a little, otherwise he would not have been taken away. After they left, the pressure on the 10,000 swords formation was much less. Feng Xia and the others only need time to breathe before they can stabilize the 10,000 sword formation for a while. When the 9 immortals and the 7 ghosts of Shihei saw it, they also retreated. However, the 9 immortals came to Zhang Xie and sneered, Zhang Xie, you are so cowardly and shameful. Don't you understand this Wu Yu? I dare say that he dares to kill Zhang Ding, Zhang Ji, but he will never kill thousands of innocent people at once. Yes. Zhang Xie thought about it, and it turned out to be true. Wu Yu, who claims to be righteous, cannot do such a thing deep down. He looked towards the 10,000 sword formation, his eyes showing an evil light again. /U003CE /U003E /U003CE /U003F. Follow the official QQ account 17K, ID, Love 17K, read early, and keep abreast of the latest information /U003C/E /U003E /U003C/E /U003E. Heaven Swallowing Record. Author, Feng-Qing Yang. Chapter 160. Just now, Zhang Xie really frightened Wu Yu. But after hearing what the 9 immortals said, I remembered that when Wu Yu was in the Xuanhuan immortal mountain, the thunder was loud and the raindrops were light, but he didn't really kill a few people at all. He understood that most people in the Tongtian sword sect had a ridiculous sense of morality in their hearts, especially Wu Yu, who seemed to be upright, almost like Feng Shui. How could such a person kill thousands of innocent people at once? Disciple. Zhang Xie understood the difference between him and Feng Shui, and the Tongtian sword section. For example, if he encountered such a situation, he would definitely kill him. He will never dare to kill someone, Zhang Xie assured several elders of the Xuanhuan Dao sect. If you don't believe it, then try it. As I write this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. In fact, when he led troops to fight in the mortal world, Wu Yu never killed surrendered soldiers, let alone killed them indiscriminately. Maybe among these thousands of people, there are many kind-hearted people. When Zhang Xie and others exited the 10,000 sword formation, Wu Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, he was also sweating heavily. In fact, he was not prepared to kill thousands of people at once, which was a hurdle. But the moment he breathed a sigh of relief, his heartstrings tightened again, and his eyes became cold again. That was because Zhang Xie had just left, and at this time, a team of nearly 20 people stepped in again. Feng Shui and others suddenly opened their eyes, and after taking a short rest, they started to operate the 10,000 sword formation again. The sword energy filled the sky, once again blocking the enemy. This time, the opponent was more determined, attacking and killing with every move, especially led by Zhang Xie, who was particularly fierce. It seemed that he was going to break through the 10,000 sword formation in one go. Zhang Xie, when encountering this situation, Wu Yu's heart boiled with anger. Do you actually want to put the lives and deaths of these thousands of disciples at risk? Wu Yu shouted angrily and tightened the Moyun vine again. The barbs on the Moyun vine pierced the necks of many disciples. Suddenly, many disciples cried out in pain. Seeing Zhang Xie's determination, the disciples couldn't help but show expressions of despair, and some even dared to scold their sect leader. Even the Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples outside the 10,000 sword formation felt chilled and stunned for a moment. If you take another step forward, I won't be polite, Wu Yu shouted and tightened his grip on the Moyun vine. For a moment, earth-shaking screams echoed throughout the Bibo Mountains. Zhang Xie actually raised his head, smiled, and said, "Just kill them. When we break through the 10,000 sword formation, we will avenge them." Then, he faced those disciples and said, "As long as we capture the Bibo Mountains, please remember that you are all the heroes of our Xuanhuan Dao section. I, Zhang Xie, will build mausoleums for you here, so that our Xuanhuan Dao sect can all the descendants of the sect will remember your names." Saying this sentence caused even more pain. Zhang Xie is so heartless. Zhang Xie, you unscrupulous turtle bastard. You deserve to die, you deserve to go to hell. Under Mo Yunteng's control, some people even hated Zhang Xie even more. Wow! More people seemed to be judged by fate, crying desperately and looking even paler. Outside the 10,000 sword formation, many disciples of the Xuanhuan Dao sect looked at each other, and many of them had ugly expressions. Although they knew that Zhang Xie would do whatever it took to achieve his goals, they did not expect that he could even sacrifice thousands of elite disciples. At that moment, All the pressure was on Wu Yu. Obviously, the life and death of these disciples seems to be unable to stop their opponents. If they maintain this level, the 10,000 sword formation will soon be destroyed. To kill, or not to kill? The other party went so far, but this problem troubled Wu Yu's heart. He looked over and saw that there were thousands of living beings. I was afraid that they were all like him, with dreams of entering the Xuanhuan Dao section. There might be some of them who were kind-hearted and had never harmed others. The guilty person for attacking the Bibo Mountains was Zhang Xie, a senior member of the Xuanhuan Dao section. They did nothing, so why did they die here? The most important thing is, if you kill thousands of people at once, do you think you are a devil? Among these thousands of people, which one is not a living life? They looked at themselves pleadingly and longingly, and every look, expression, tear, and desperation was definitely more than just a cold number. At that moment, Wu Yu really struggled. He didn't expect that there would be so many struggles on the road to immortality. This is a challenge to human nature and rationality. Humanly speaking, he cannot do this. This is against the laws of heaven and detrimental to merit. Rationally, if you don't kill people, how can you frighten Zhang Xie and Xuanhuan Daozong? If I were you, I would kill these people. Zhang Xie obviously got it right, and you don't dare to kill anyone. Ming Long was bored and rolled his eyes. Really? So that's it? It seems that Zhang Xie really understands himself. Not just Wu Yu, but any disciple of the Tongtian sword sect, who could kill thousands of innocent people at once. Aren't you afraid of punishment from heaven or nightmares? This is all murder. Huh. Wu Yu never conquered his heart and really killed him. This is a difficult problem that fate has given him. He knows in his heart that if he is strong enough, this will not be a problem. He does not need to kill people to scare his opponents. Wu Yu suddenly, Wan Tianyuxio stepped forward, drew out his long sword, and slashed suddenly. Suddenly, the Xuanhuan Dao sect disciple who shouted the loudest was beheaded by him. His actions shocked everyone and attracted their attention, and then he said to Wu Yu, I, a disciple of the Tongtian sword sect, have a moral heart and will not do anything that compromises merit. Killing one person is considered a hero, and killing 1,000 people is considered a devil. Our brothers, we will never let you bear this burden. Everyone, come up. This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Perhaps Wan Tianyuxio can understand Wu Yu best, because obviously, he can't do it. Even Feng Xia can't do this evil ghost. This is the biggest difference between them and ghost cultivators and demons, like that of the 7 ghosts of the Red Sea, which one doesn't have 100,000 lives on his hands. For a moment, the thousands of disciples of the Tongtian sword sect came forward in unison. Each of them stood in front of a disciple of the Xuanhuan Dao section. They held the magic weapon long sword with both hands and placed it among those on the necks of Yuan Dao sect disciples. They were ready to behead, just one for each of them. If each person kills one person, even if it damages his merits, it will be shared equally among the brothers and sisters. Wu Yu, leave this matter of killing to us. Wan Tianyuxio showed off her senior brother's demeanor at this time. Zhan had already shocked Wu Yu. Now he raised his sword high, and thousands of people raised their swords. How can this scene not be frightening with the flashing sword light rising to the sky? Tongtian sword sect is facing such a crisis. How can they not hate any disciple of Xuanhuan Dao sect? On the battlefield, there really is no distinction between good and evil, only camps. Disciple Tongtian, listen to my order and kill. Following Wan Tianyuxio's order, everyone's magic weapons and long swords were about to be chopped down in unison, beheading thousands of people. These disciples of the Tongtian sword sect are not Wu Yu alone. Wu Yu may not be able to kill thousands of people at once, but it is absolutely easy for each of them to kill one person. There is absolutely no possibility that they can't do it. Stop, I quit. Zhang Xie was sure that Wu Yu could not take action, but when the snow came in the evening, he could only retreat, and the elders of the Xuanhuan Dao sect did not agree. For a moment, he shouted loudly, he led the elders to escape in embarrassment and ended the attack on the 10,000 sword formation. The threat of these thousands of disciples was finally effective. On the side of the Tongtian sword sect, most of the disciples' swords stopped in mid-air. A few of them took a step faster and cut off their heads, which frightened the surrounding Xuanhuan Dao sect disciples. Under Wan Tianyugxia's order, everyone stopped killing for the time being, but the long sword, the magical weapon, was still placed on the necks of those disciples. For a moment, it was like a hell on earth, with screams and screams. Many disciples were so frightened that they collapsed on the ground and were already incontinent. Hoo-hoo! The battlefield seemed to be still for a moment. Zhang Xie led the Xuanhuan Dao sect out and stood outside the 10,000 swords formation. Their faces were all pale and they were struggling. They had to admit that Wu Yu really posed a threat to them this time. Even Wu Yu himself didn't expect this change of things. He asked, "Senior brother, am I too cowardly?" Wan Tianyugxiu smiled and shook his head, saying, "This does not count. We sword cultivators must not go down the path of killing crazy demons. This is what Master taught us. To practice Tao, we need to have principles in our hearts and kill those who deserve to be killed. People must not be blinded by killing. If you were killed today, we might not recognize you. Wu Yu, it is absolutely right to keep the right path in your heart." With his words, Wu Yu passed this hurdle. At that moment, he really had the idea of killing thousands of people in an instant. It was a difficult struggle. "Master asked me to help you. Perhaps, he is also worried that you have shaken your will," Wan Tianyugxiu said. "So that's it?" When Wu Yu looked up, he could only see Feng Shui's back. He was still controlling the 10,000 swords formation. Although Zhang Xie had withdrawn, the 7 ghosts and demons of the Red Sea still hadn't stopped. If it was the 10,000 swords formation, in its intact state, Feng Xie could even hit them hard, but now, even if Zhang Xie withdraws, the 10,000 sword formation is still a little unstable, and I'm afraid it won't last long. The biggest effect of these thousands of people is to keep Zhang Xie from taking action for the time being. But with Zhang Xie's cruel heart, he won't be able to hold on for long, let alone let him do other things. Otherwise, he would really let this person thousands of people died. It's snowy in the evening. Wu Yu naturally understood that among the people he had ever met, Zhang Xie was the most different both internally and externally. He looked like a fairy on the surface, but he was a devil in his heart. Now it is a stalemate again. Without Zhang Xie and Xuanhuan Daozong, the destruction of Juxian and others has slowed down. Feng Shui and the others have recovered a lot after resting, but if this continues, it will still be detrimental to Tongtian sword section scene. Wu Yu delivered Moyandeng to Wan Tianyugxiu. "Junior brother, what do you want to do?" Wan Tianyugxiu was startled. "Enter the 10,000 sword formation and kill those who deserve to be killed. Now, Wu Yu can only do this. /U003CE /U003E /U003CE /U003F Follow the official QQ account 17K, ID, Love 17K, read early, and keep abreast of the latest information /U003C /E /U003E /U003C /E /U003E